A lot of people are going to lose their jobs and wait for the old hiring process to work out for them. Or they have a fantasy of their business suddenly kicking into gear. But for the most part, if they cared enough about their business, they would know why it might pick up, and it usually isn't going to be out of the blue. I can mention that the reasons why I advertise web development services the ways that I do are because the reasons, I'm not sure how I pluralized that. The main reason is storytelling is the most important dimension of why you would want a web interface. What is the story that the person who is navigating that interface tells themselves to motivate them through the process? And also, how do you reward that with grounded experience? The concept that I introduced in this video is that the reason people visit websites is to verify that the website is about what it claims to be. There are also game engines and platforms that distribute games. The reason you would hire me specifically is to tell a specific kind of story with your brand. If you aren't sure what that means, you can schedule a consultation with me or follow along for a few more years. If you already know you're looking for services like mine, it usually takes about 8 months before you make the decision to reach out. It's easier and cheaper if you start earlier because sometimes I just update your site with the latest and greatest tools. So the earlier you ask for my services, the earlier I can actually get started on something. Send me a DM or leave a comment. Or you can ask me if you see me on a TikTok live. Cheers! On TikTok, you can have a streak pet, and you can do something that I call popcorn kernel development, which is where you vibe code a kernel and you wonder about the things your group sends you. Then, on a day-to-day basis, you try to start the day with wonder about a show that you can create, and develop this production process with your kernel. The reason you would want to do this is the motivated continuity is actually one of the greatest quality assurance assets you can possibly have. A caveat is that you can't outpace your motivated curiosity, you can't outpace your continuity with whatever you want to be focused on. A cool thing is that if you've gone to college and majored in a if you've gone to college and majored in a subject, then you can consider what you would focus on. If you get a PhD, you can be more sure that in the short term, fewer people will know specifically what you specifically have focused on. A downside of that is that you need to do some marketing to get people familiar with what you're talking about. But a major upside is once you've done that marketing, you can just describe what you've studied, and people who are interested in your product will care. So the concept that I introduced in this video is that if you've gone to college, you can start a group chat on TikTok and do what I call popcorn kernel development. And this is where you try to grow your corn. On TikTok, the group chat streak pet is corn. So you try to grow your streak pet and wonder about novel kernel development. And you can also publish a book and find other people who would want to read it via book talk. You can also write a book via the same process as popcorn kernel development. It might need a lot of refinement, and that's why I would recommend knowing an editor. The intended audience for this video is principal engineers. Also, I'm looking for principal engineering roles or founding engineer roles. Send me a DM. Cheers. The software engineering interview process is really long or really short because you don't actually need to know that many things about an engineer to try them out. Although, we all know that engineers can be expensive, so it feels like we need to put them through the ringer. Most people could be interviewed for a long time, and also we can make videos that describe the kind of thing that we tend to focus on. As a person with 15 years of engineering experience, I believe we need to make the software engineering interview process more deterministic, which also means returning to day in the life of a software engineer type videos. Because there are a lot of holes in math, and we can potentially spiral into some components of computer science, etc. From a mental health perspective, it's important to have a lot of different viewpoints so we can start off strong and healthy and wonder about the possibilities of development. I've been developing my own language, but I tend to use TypeScript for casual projects. I got my start programming with C++ and then professionally went into web development with PHP and JavaScript. Then PHP frameworks and JavaScript libraries, SQL around that time. In college, I did casual scripting with Python, and I explored writing my own PHP framework a few times from scratch. I learned that learnability is one of the most important dimensions of a framework. Most relevant, I should say. While I was in college, I founded a student organization called Student Body for Meaningful Education. This was connected to a project called FactShift, which I thought would be like an open source version of Wikipedia. What did that mean? There was some nuance about learning styles. The main reason I recommend learning languages is to wonder about the philosophy that inspired their development. Also, consider how others have related to their syntax and wonder about what could be found interesting. Integrated development environments are, well, they're a medium, they're plugins that are used by hundreds of millions of people. So now I'm curious about exploring storytelling in a code based context with literate programming. Like when we know that we have this old monolithic code base and we're wondering about its structure, how can we actually make that interesting? And I believe, connected to a concept of popcorn kernel development, I believe it's possible to wonder about Minecraft and bring a team along this process. And in the process of bringing a team along the process, we can actually develop fluencies in some languages. Not every person who likes the idea of engineering is going to want to be an engineer. And it is, it's important and possible for experienced engineers to describe which standards are worth keeping. And there are a lot of different domains for application. I have 42 domains. I've had more in the past. Some have expired, some I haven't renewed. I've wondered about old ones, reflected on hosting options, the times that I've had them online, the times that I've had very few visitors, the patterns that I know to get views. Now I mostly appreciate my domains as a metacognitive exercise, and it's also been pretty interesting to see what Midjourney has to say about each of them. So in a team context, now it's possible to just fling domains into a kernel development context and wonder what will come out. And with that, knowing that will happen, wondering about what could be, well, information technology has a lot that can be explored. Cheers. Factshift.com has been down for months, or it had been, and then I turned it back on a couple days ago. I've been curious what that domain would be useful for because I thought that it was going to be a better version of Wikipedia when I started it. Then I switched majors to learning and education studies because I realized I didn't know enough about learning to make what I wanted. Then some time passed, and various AI companies have made the concept less necessary. The idea of replacing specifically with, pardon, the idea of replacing specifically Wikipedia with a better version. Now I view it as more of a canvas, and I like the idea of people being able to interact with the interface to get it into certain states that they can refresh and have that change. So I want factshift.com to be a metacognitive portal that someone can learn and make that something useful. I hope someone can learn the interface and make it useful for storytelling. And I also hope the physics of the interface make it possible for pretty much anyone to have the same context of communication. The same context. See, that's where it becomes difficult. If I open factshift.com on my phone and also on a desktop device, the frames are going to be different sizes. So how can communication flow similarly between those portals? That's an interesting question, and one that I'm kind of interested to explore. When I say kind of interested, I mean I've already gotten factshift.com back online, and I've already posed the question of what could the domain be meaningful for. There is a version 2 that I do have planned, and I guess this is a medium. This is something that I can describe. I can tell a story with this medium. Factshift.center is another domain. Not sure how long I'm going to hold on to that one. I'll probably link the account for factshift.com in this TikTok description. Cheers.